In 53 BC, 50,000 Roman soldiers marched into the Mesopotamian desert to conquer Persia. Not a single one ever returned home. Welcome to History Snapshots. This is the story of Rome's greatest military disaster and what it reveals about the gap between confidence and competence that still destroys organizations today. Marcus Licinius Crassus was the richest man in Rome. He had crushed the Spartacus rebellion, accumulated wealth beyond measure through fire brigades and real estate speculation, and now craved the one thing money couldn't buy: military glory to rival Pompey and Caesar. At age 60, he secured appointment as governor of Syria and immediately began planning an invasion of Parthia, Rome's eastern rival, the Persian Empire's successor state. The Senate opposed the campaign. Augurs declared the omens unfavorable. One tribune physically tried to block Crassus from leaving Rome, pronouncing a formal curse. None of it mattered. Crassus commanded 7 legions, approximately 50,000 soldiers, the largest Roman force ever assembled for an eastern campaign. He believed Roman discipline and heavy infantry tactics were invincible. The Parthians, he assumed, would crumble like every other enemy Rome had faced. Crassus rejected the advice of experienced officers who urged him to follow the Euphrates River, which would provide water and supply lines. Instead, he hired an Arab chieftain named Ariamnes as a guide, a man who promised a shortcut across the desert that would bring the legions directly to Parthian wealth. What Crassus didn't know was that Ariamnes served the Parthian king, Orodes II. The Roman army marched through increasingly barren terrain. The legionaries, accustomed to European climates, suffered under the relentless sun. Their armor became furnaces. Water supplies dwindled. Ariamnes led them deeper into the wasteland, away from rivers, away from forage, toward a carefully chosen killing ground near the town of Carrhae. Meanwhile, the Parthian general Surena shadowed the Roman column with 10,000 cavalry, a fraction of Crassus's force in numbers, but perfectly adapted to desert warfare. Parthian horse archers could fire backward at full gallop, a technique Romans had never encountered. Their composite bows outranged Roman javelins, and Surena had brought 1,000 camels loaded with arrows, ensuring his archers would never run out of ammunition. On a scorching plain near Carrhae, the Parthians attacked. But they didn't charge. They circled at a distance, releasing wave after wave of arrows into the packed Roman formations. The legionaries raised their shields in the testudo formation, creating an armored shell. It didn't matter. Arrows pierced shields, found gaps in armor, struck from angles Roman tactics hadn't anticipated. Crassus ordered his son Publius to break the encirclement with the cavalry and light infantry, about 6,000 men. The Parthians feigned retreat, a classic steppe tactic. Publius pursued, his force drawn miles from the main army. Then, the Parthian cataphracts, heavily armored shock cavalry, turned and surrounded him. Publius and his entire detachment were annihilated. The Parthians returned, with his head mounted on a spear, parading it before the Roman lines. What happened at Carrhae reveals something we see repeated in every era: institutional arrogance mistakes past success for universal competence. The Roman legion was optimized for Mediterranean warfare, disciplined infantry dominating similar opponents. Crassus never asked whether his advantage translated to a different environment against a different enemy. He assumed superiority was inherent rather than contextual. That assumption cost 40,000 lives. The Roman formation disintegrated. Soldiers broke ranks seeking water that didn't exist. Officers lost control. Crassus, paralyzed by shock after his son's death, could barely issue orders. As night fell, the surviving Romans attempted a chaotic retreat toward the town of Carrhae. The Parthians didn't pursue immediately. They didn't need to. They knew the desert would do their work. Roman soldiers, maddened by thirst and terror, scattered. Some were hunted down by Parthian scouts. Others simply collapsed and died where they fell. Approximately 20,000 Romans were killed in the battle and subsequent rout. Another 10,000 were captured and marched to the eastern edge of the Parthian Empire, where they spent the rest of their lives as prisoners, some possibly serving as border guards in what is now Afghanistan. Crassus himself was killed during a botched negotiation. According to legend, the Parthians poured molten gold into his mouth, a symbolic commentary on the greed that had driven his campaign. His head was sent to the Parthian king, who was watching a performance of Euripides' The Bacchae. The actors used Crassus's actual severed head as a prop. Only about 10,000 Romans made it back to Syria. 7 legions had entered Parthia. Barely 2 legions worth returned. But Carrhae wasn't the end of Rome's disappearing armies in the east. 6 decades later, another Roman force vanished under mysterious circumstances. The Legio IX Hispana, the 9th Legion, was stationed in Britain around AD 108. Then, it disappears from all historical records. No battle account, no disbandment order, no archaeological trace after that date. For generations, historians theorized it was destroyed in Caledonia, modern Scotland, during a rebellion. Rosemary Sutcliffe's 1954 novel The Eagle of the Ninth popularized this version, embedding it in popular imagination. But recent scholarship suggests something different. Inscriptions place 9th Legion officers in the eastern provinces around AD 120. The legion may have been transferred to fight in the Roman-Parthian War of 113 to 117, part of Emperor Trajan's disastrous invasion of Mesopotamia. Trajan initially succeeded, capturing the Parthian capital of Ctesiphon, but he overextended, just as Crassus had. Rebellions erupted across the conquered territories. Roman garrisons were isolated and destroyed. Trajan died in 117, and his successor Hadrian immediately abandoned all territory east of the Euphrates. In the chaos, entire units were annihilated without record. The 9th Legion may have been one of them, another Roman force swallowed by Persia, its fate deliberately obscured by an empire that couldn't afford to admit the scale of the disaster. Rome fought Persia for 7 centuries. The borders shifted, but neither empire ever conquered the other. Rome's legions dominated Europe, North Africa, the Mediterranean. But Persia remained unconquerable, not because Rome didn't try, but because Roman military doctrine was fundamentally mismatched to the theater. Every few generations, a new Roman commander would look east and see opportunity. Each believed his predecessors had simply executed poorly. Each believed Roman superiority was absolute rather than conditional. And each discovered the same truth Crassus had, that dominance in one context guarantees nothing in another. What Carrhae reveals isn't just ancient history. It's the mechanism behind every institutional failure that begins with the words, "our proven approach." Crassus optimized for the wrong variables. He brought maximum force rather than appropriate force, doubled down on strength rather than adapting to circumstance. His soldiers paid the price for his certainty. In your own organization, watch for the Carrhae pattern, the leader who mistakes past success for universal competence, who enters a new competitive landscape with old assumptions, who interprets caution as cowardice. The market doesn't care about your track record. The enemy doesn't fight on your terms. And confidence, no matter how justified by history, is not a strategy. Crassus commanded 50,000 men who believed Roman discipline made them invincible. The desert proved otherwise. The question isn't whether you're competent. It's whether your competence matches the terrain you're entering.